Hey everyone, it's been a while since I made a tier list for X-Samkok, so that's what we're going to do today. We've got the tier split into the usual SS, SS, and S. Now with a special tier for a special unit and a situational tier for some units that you can use in certain situations. We've also got the link and food tier. This is basically just all your food stuff that you can use to link to these other units up here. So you can either use them to rank up units, or you can use them to get to 5-star or 5 divine or unparalleled, and then use them to link to all your other IMT or fabled units. So first up, we got Cao Cao going into link and food, and Sima Yi will join him there. We got Zhang Lao going into S tier. He's still decent. He's still actually good for free-to-play players. So if you're still playing free-to-play, you can still use him for sure. And he can put out some good damage still. Next we got Chao Ren, and he's link and food obviously. Although I did see a person who has 5 billion power using him in their team the other day. So maybe there's something we don't know about that he does. I mean, he does take debuffs off your units, put them on himself, and then transfer them to the enemies. So maybe he was using him for something specific. IMT Zhang Fei is next, and he's situational. You can use him for his invincible shields, crit res reduction, debuff for the enemies, and crit damage buff for your allies. He also increases pursuit damage, and he can actually tank some really good damage because he's got a 2-turn unyielding. So you can use him in certain situations that you need a good tank, or you just want to debuff the enemy's crit res if you got high crit damage, stuff like that. Next we got Dian Wei, link and food, same with Xiao Ho Dun. Zhu Jie Long going into S tier. He's still good for free-to-play players, just like Zhang Lao. And he'll keep your rage up, also buffing your attack and crit rate, but neither one of these units are anything special anymore, not at this point in the game. Next we got Nuwa, and she's going into SS tier. She's incredibly good, and she'll increase your team's survivability a lot. She's going to be healing, removing debuffs, and increasing damage reduction with just her main skill. She basically won't be hurt in the first 6 attacks, and she can revive a unit once per battle as well. She can also give big shields to allies, and the shield can reflect damage back at the attacker. She also has other damage reduction stuff in her Martial Soul. She's just really good at increasing the survivability of your team. Next is Guo Jia and Lady Zen and Zhang Fei, all in link and food. There's no real reason to use this regular Zhang Fei because we did get two or three copies of the IMT Zhang Fei. I think it was 2. So yeah, you might as well use him. The regular Zhang Fei is just link and food now. Apsara is next, and she's our special tier. She's capable of increasing your damage output significantly, by a crazy amount. But, and of course there's a but, your 2 damage dealers buffed by her cannot act in the first round. Although they won't be defeated, they won't be able to be killed, they can still be hit, and they won't gain any rage or anything like that. They're basically self-exiled, and it can be really bad. So that's why she's a bit of a gamble. She's kind of a special unit. And although they can attack, they'll be able to debuff the enemy that dealt the highest damage to them in odd-numbered turns, banning rage gain and healing and reducing their defense. The buffed officers can also ignore invincible and unyielding, which is really good. She's a crazy good support, but she's more geared towards PvE than PvP for sure. If you can do good while your team is handicapped and you have a bunch of exiled people and you can smash them down after that with all the damage buffs that they'll have, then you're golden. But if the handicap screws you over, then you're pretty much done for. So one of the good things is you can choose who to buff. It's not random. You just throw them in the same row as her. But again, that exile she's a hit or miss character. So you can use her in some PvP areas where you just want to go straight damage, because she does increase their damage by a crazy amount. And these next units are all going into link and food. That is Zhou Yu, Huang Yeying, Ma Chao. Nope, that's not, that's Jiang Wei. I need glasses, I think. This is Ma Chao, and we've got Taishi Si and Guan Yu's actually going in there as well. Everybody should have the Demon Guan Yu at this point, the first IMT to come out. And we're so far into the game, there's really not a reason to use regular Guan Yu. So we got IMT Sun Si next, and he's also going into SS tier. He's still capable of some crazy damage, and he's one of the top 3 damage dealers in the game. You know what he does by now. He's detonating fire, flame, and burn debuffs while buffing his crit rate and his skill damage, and also debuffing enemies' attack. He's also going to be doing pursuit damage with a crit damage buff. Really good damage dealer here, as long as you get his true fire stacks up quickly and you have some burns to play off of. If you have his heroic soul ranked up, I think is it 5 or 10, he can actually do burn debuffs himself, like apply burn debuffs that he can then detonate and then extend them. But if you don't have his heroic soul leveled up, you need a unit to pair with him that will be doing some burns. Next up, all these units go into Lincoln Food. We got Zhao Yun, Liu Bei, Huang Gai, and Dong Zhou. Stick them in there. Oh, also Sun Quan. Ninetales is next, and she's also going into Situational. She's kinda like an improved version of Huangzong. She basically stuns and forbids rage regen and has a 100% chance for the stun on her skill and a 30% chance on the battle start. She's going to be buffing team crit rate, crit damage, and attack a bit every time Charm hits. Charm is her debuff that she uses. What's really good about her is her Martial Soul 4, which reduces target's HP and shield by 4% if her charm fails, so she can actually deal some damage and get rid of some shields. And Martial Soul 5, that's actually increased to 6%, I think it was. She's kind of a jack of all trades and a master of none, so you can use her situationally for the stuns and the shield reduction. Not shield reduction, but like extra shield damage. Next we got Sun Si, Xiao Qiao, Lu Zun, Da Qiao, Yu Ji, and Zuotzi. Zuotzi could be used situationally for her rage reduction against the enemy. If you find yourself unable to pass a stage, and you can try using her in combination with other rage reduction functions in the game to try to shut down enemies' use of rage skills, but for the most part she's just going to be Lincoln Food at this point. Same with Dao Chen and Hua Tuo, Yuan Shao, and Lu Bu. Demon Lu Bu is next and going into SS tier. He's still pretty decent and he can deal some substantial damage, although he does need a lot of work. He's going to be doing a lot of basic attack damage AoEs with his counterattacks, up to 5 per turn. He will also punish people for stockpiling rage with his slaughter, and each time an enemy loses HP because of slaughter, he does another AoE basic attack. And he'll also heal himself quite a bit, which is really nice. But he doesn't really do anything super special, so that's why he's in SS tier. Gongshun Zan is in Food and Link. Demon Guan Yu's next, and I'm putting him into S tier. He's really nothing too special anymore, unfortunately. His Hellfire will be buffing some allies' crit rate and damage, and it can also limit the damage a unit takes to 40% of their max HP. This damage limit isn't nearly as good as when he first came out though, because we have so many different damage mitigations now. Least to say Blessing, which is 50% max HP and it's permanent, and Hellfire is 40% and it only lasts for 1 hit. So when you combine that with like all the shields we're getting, the damage reduction, Sundering Behemoth, like Hellfire is not very useful at all anymore. Ho Yi's up next, and I'm also putting him into S tier. He's going to be locking onto the highest attack enemy and attacking them with nothing but his skill because he doesn't have a basic attack. He does increase his rage so he can use his skill all the time. Every time the locked on enemy takes action, he'll attack them up to 4 times per turn and will deal overflow damage to all enemies when he kills his target. The thing with him though is he's going to lock onto somebody and then Zulong's going to exile them, or Aspara will self-exile them. Pangu can also mess him up, so he can't be used in every fight. And then if that unit gets unyielding or invincible, like he's just going to be butting his head against the wall, right? So can't use him in every fight, so you should probably focus on a different Fabled unit. He's the worst Fabled unit, in my opinion. Zhu Sheng. It's either double S or Situational. I'm going to throw him in Situational for now, just because if you don't have Sun Si's Heroic Soul ranked up and you're still going to need to use Zhu Sheng to apply the burns, you can throw him in SS. You can also use him in PvP for his AoE stuns, which are still really good. If you do have Sun Si's Heroic Soul ranked up, and Sun Si can do his own burns, then you won't really have much of a need for Zhu Sheng, so he'll be more of a situational unit for the stuns. Liu Shan is Lincoln Food. Immortal Xiao Qiao going into SS tier. Probably put her ahead of him actually. She's still a pretty decent unit with her rage stealing, invincible shields, letting a random officer take an extra turn. What's really good though is her ability to prevent healing and reduce shields by 50% for your enemies. She'll also be doing a bit of damage with her debuffs, which will pair well with IMT Sun Si because they do count as a burn. She still has her use for sure, you won't see her in every team anymore, but she's still pretty good. Jiaju is Link Food. Neza is going into Triple S. He's got a pretty strong burn debuff that ignores defense and can't be dispelled or resisted. He has a chance to follow up any ally's attack with his own attack that will have a crit rate buff. He'll be buffing his attack and damage bonus after each attack. Basic attacks can inflict Firestorm debuff, and after every 10 actions, it will hit every enemy with a Firestorm. When officers with Firestorm take damage, they'll also take extra Firestorm damage up to 5 times and 8 stacks. At 15 Firestorm stacks, it'll morph into Firestorm Wheel, which will buff its damage, and it can burst, dealing 10% max HP damage. And that's gonna ignore Unyielding and Invincible and other effects. It's a pretty damn good damage dealer here. Demon Zhao Yun is up next and going into SS tier. You should all know this guy at this point. Tons of extra attacks, like a ton of extra attacks. He's going to be buffing himself a lot as well, buffing his damage in like 3 or 4 different ways, if I remember correctly. He's going to buff his crit rate, his hit rate, even his attack and defense, plus self-healing. And not to forget his shield and healing reduction. He's still a mainstay in a lot of teams, and I still use him myself actually. He deals a lot of damage while nerfing the team's survivability. Huangzong's up next and going into Situational. He debuffs an enemy unit with Numb, which is basically a stun, except unfortunately it's removed after taking 3 hits. He'll be filling his own rage meter up and will inflict Numb on 2 enemies when using his skill. Numb is also going to be dealing some damage while also increasing their pursuit and skill damage received. When Huangzong gets hit, he has a small chance to inflict Numb on the attacker as well. He's pretty similar to Ninetales, just not as good, so use him if you need to for stuns, but other than that, you could just leave him alone. Sun Wukong is next. He's actually my favorite unit, and he's going into triple S tier. He's probably the best damage dealer in the game. If you're on an earlier server and you're just getting into the Fabled units, you can't go wrong with pouring your summons into this guy. He does AoE damage with a good chance to cast the skill twice, and he has a 100% crit rate buff for the first turn. He also has a good chance for skill pursuit. He'll be buffing his attack and defense and skill damage and damage bonus and damage reduction, like a ton of self buffs. He can also attack up to 4 times per turn, with 3 of them being the skill pursuits. After he gains 2 stacks of his monkey buff, he'll ignore invincible shields and unyielding effects, which is really good. Also, if the targets have neither one of those buffs, like the invincible and unyielding, he'll add an additional 120% of damage to that attack. Like I said, this guy's just a fantastic unit. He deals a crap ton of damage. Zhang He is next, and finally going into Link and Food. Now we got Pangu going into triple S tier. He is the exile unit, and he'll exile an enemy from battle after his skill if there are more than 2 enemies. This gives you the number advantage, which you shouldn't underestimate. He's also going to be reducing enemies' rage both after skill and basic attack. If it doesn't reduce the rage, it'll stun them instead, which is just awesome. Pangu is actually able to attack the exiled officers and debuff them with Celestial, which is going to allow your team to attack them. That's right, your team can attack the exiled officers, which is nuts. Celestial will also increase the final damage taken by the enemy while also reducing their crit res and their crit damage reduction. At Martial Soul 4, he himself is immune to Banish, and at MS5, he buffs banished allies, which allows them to attack. The only counter to Pangu is your own Pangu. Immortal Zuje Long is next, going into SS tier. There are ways around needing him for rage regen. I believe it's the Azure Dragon Stratagem and the Auspicious Killing Beast Martial Soul. So if you have that set up, he'll drop a tier for you. But that's more for the whales. I'm not whaling out. I still need a rage generator, as of most people, so he is SS tier. He'll also be buffing our attack, our crit rate, and our crit res, as well as healing our team. His Martial Soul will give us some healing and shielding, some pursuit and basic attack damage reduction, as well as a chance for Magic Shield, and at Martial Soul 5, it can allow every team member to make an extra basic attack. Zhong Hui is going into Link and Food. Now that we have a better unit to buff damage, although he can still be used situationally, but you can't really guarantee which unit he's going to be buffing. Unlike Aspara, you can choose which units that she'll be buffing. And finally I have Elsa. I'm going to put her probably middle of the road triple S tier. She's a pretty cool unit, she's our newest one. Her skill has a good chance to inflict Arctic, which is a damage over time debuff, which can stack up and increase the damage it deals by 300%, as well as heal Elsa and 1 random ally. It'll self-buff its crit rate up to 100%, and then once it reaches 100%, it deals triple crit damage until the end of the battle, which is really wild. Although she's not going to be dealing as much damage as like a dedicated damage dealer, she's more of a support who can actually put out some pretty good damage. What's really good about her though is her Frigid debuff. It can hit up to 4 units per turn because of her chance to cast her skill twice, and it will completely shut down enemy pursuits. It like disables their ability to pursue. And it also increased the target's final damage taken while also reducing their shield and healing by 30%. All of that gets increased in her heroic soul as well, so that's one of the few heroic souls that are really worth leveling up. Just a really wild new unit that just came out and be really interesting to see how it shakes things up in PvP. Probably won't use her too much in PvE, she's more of a PvP unit, and in large part there to disable pursuit. And that is the full tier list. I believe this is 5.0. So I'll come up with another one after a few more units get released, and I'll catch you guys next time. See ya.